First round officially in the books. The second round is underway. It's going to be a lot of fun. Before, though, we get too far into it, obviously, if you're watching on video, you can see this fact. But if you're not watching, Justin is off this week. Our pal Nick Gryniewicz is here, voice of the Osceola Magic, play-by-play voice of the Osceola Magic, I should say, at GetNickG on Twitter. And it's kind of ironic because and not to totally like start on a random note, but I finally saw Justin in person for the first time in like 2.5 years on Saturday. It quietly has been that long with moving out of Florida and doing all that fun stuff. But I did think there was some kind of delicious irony in Justin being off, but then me finally seeing him in person. But nevertheless, we start with warm-up jumpers. Nick's here. It's fitting with that we have some breaking news as well, though it's probably the least surprising breaking news of all time. Rookie of the Year is out. Victor Wembanyama is the winner, unanimous winner. Chet Holmgren in second, Brandon Miller in third. I think he had the widest margin of victory I'm looking at here since Karl Anthony Towns. So obviously some pretty good company to be in there, or whatever I'm trying to say. It's funny though, Nick, like Chet Holmgren actually, I feel like started early in the season. There was kind of some, hey, Wemby's a project. Maybe Chet's more finished and he's going to play on OKC. So obviously impacting winning there right away. And then Wemby, it took, I think, all of 2 months to totally sway the vote for this. Just the fact that he's already making a pretty compelling argument that he's the best defender in the entire NBA is pretty ridiculous in year one.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the crazy thing is that I think if this was a quarter pole of the season award or even a half of the season award, Chet Holmgren very much could have won it. But Wemby finished the year very strong the last couple of months, and while San Antonio lost a lot of basketball games, there's just kind of an it factor to Wemby. He's got it, whether it's on the offensive end or the defensive end. Like you can see, he's going to transform franchises. So it's no surprise that he won. I'm a little surprised someone didn't get cute and put a couple other first place votes a few places. But, it being unanimous, I think everyone felt this way during spurts of the year where you look at him and it's like, whoa, that's the dude. So, yeah, not a whole lot of surprise that Wemby's the rookie of the year.
I would think that there would be one or two voters that would have got cute and put Chet there, because Chet had obviously a great
Oklahoma
year
City.
As well. Yeah, super compelling. Like OKC is the number one overall seed. Like I know Shai is the guy there, but still regardless, Holmgren comes in year one. He's a huge part of them winning right away. I mean, beyond that, it wasn't really anyone that could get on the table. Like Brandon Miller surged late, and he actually, I mean, hats off to him. I know Charlotte was, pretty unwatchable for most of the year, but Brandon Miller really stood out towards the end. I was one of those beating the drum heavy for Scoot Henderson, being a much more impact player right away. I thought he was going to make the difference in Portland, and I thought Brandon Miller was kind of a bust of a pick for Charlotte. And so far, 1 year in, I have not been correct about that. I mean, beyond that, other guys getting third place votes like Walkhez in Miami, Pod's out for Golden State. Derek Lively got a third place vote here for Dallas. But I mean, there was nobody even really close to Chet, or even I would say Brandon Miller in third. But like, if you're not voting for Chet in first place over Wemby, it would just be completely unserious in my eyes.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And so much of this award too is just, it's an attention award. Brandon Miller was not, how many Charlotte Hornets games did you watch this year? Because I mean, I think I can name 2 guys on their roster. Miller's one of them. It's just where you are. You're out of sight, out of mind. And Wemby was on national TV more than the Orlando Magic this year, and his team won 12, 15 games or something. So, when you're on and people are watching you, there's, those storylines that go along with it. He took the league by storm. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
I think that is kind of one of the remarkable things too. And maybe this is a testament to San Antonio to get it together. It's like Wemby was such a massive difference maker in this first year already. Like, I thought Wemby was going to be great. Like I firmly believed and was in the camp that he is this generational prospect that's going to break basketball. Like I think we've already seen the highlights of it multiple times. Like it got to that point where every other game there was a highlight where you just went, I didn't think that was possible. But the fact that San Antonio only won 22 games, like there is some instant pressure right away where it's like, hey, he's this good. his supporting cast being this bad that they're down there with the worst teams in the NBA. It's like, let's get it together here sooner than later. I think some of it, guys will be intrigued to come play with Wemby no matter what, right? So I think that now that they see the hype is real, but yeah, it's going to be up to San Antonio to really get guys that compliment him. Like, there were a lot of games where it didn't feel like they could get him the ball, and it's just like, what is happening here right now, guys? Like, are we trying not to force feed our alien player? Like, let's get him going.
Yeah, it's not often you have to say to Greg Popovich, hey, get serious. But it kind of felt that way this year. Like, they were actively trying to lose basketball games at times. And so, they're going to have a high pick in the draft this year. They've got the odds for the number one spot, whether they get that or not. But it's going to be about having some money to spend, too. Can they go out and find some free agents? Maybe one key player to bring in there with Wemby to make that jump from worst team in the league, maybe to, competing for a play-in spot or something. But, as we've seen with recent young guys, it's an Anthony Edwards, Apollo Bancheras. I'm like, you get that one guy, and all of a sudden, it feels like there's a lot of ladder to climb, and it gets a lot shorter once you get that one dude, and Wemby's definitely going to be that.
Yeah, he's that ultimate one dude, right? And I mean, you already kind of saw it a little bit at the end of the year. Like, I mean, pretty much from March to the end of the season, the end of March through the rest of the season, like, they played a lot better. They were 6-4 in their last 10. Ended the season with a few good wins. I mean, that Denver one most notably on April 12th. I mean, that's a shocker. Denver was playing for seeding at that time. Like, that was a game they were trying to win. So to win that regular season game late for Wemby to dominate the way he did, like, again, like, it goes without saying the future is bright there. We'll see how this rookie class does overall. Like, Wemby, of course, is the star. Chet's definitely a star. Brandon Miller, like we said, I think we've undersold probably how good he looks overall. He certainly seems like, Charlotte had, I mean, it's tough. You would say they have two guys, but LaMelo Ball just can't stay on the floor, right? Like, it's a bona fide constant injury risk with LaMelo at this point. But you almost kind of, like, Brandon Miller will make you forget about that a little bit. They'll have another high pick this year as well. Jaquez was a peak culture guy right away for the Heat, coming in and making an instant impact. Pod's making a big impact for Golden State too. But there hasn't been as much, and I guess it's weird to say in a class with generational rookies, but it does feel like there's a bit of a gap here for the ceiling, right? After 1, 2, 3, like, it kind of falls off a little bit, but nevertheless, a pretty good class at the top. I mean, I almost, again, with Chet too, just the fact that he was able to contribute to winning. Like, I know I'm sounding like a broken record there a little bit, but it felt like all the pieces were on the table for OKC to take the leap, but for them to take the leap all the way up to the number one seed in the West, it's pretty darn impressive. Like, you're checking a lot of boxes there. And I think the winning traditionally has factored in more to the rookie of the year. Like, I think if anything, Wemby's such a good prospect that it is the rare instance where the winning or the lack of winning, like, wasn't held against him. Because normally in the past, I think with Chet, with the team making a big leap like that, we would be inclined to say, oh no, that's the award winner, because he was, such a massive part of that.
Yeah, I would agree. And that was kind of the odd thing, that it was a unanimous vote too, right? So you would think any other year, you've got a rookie, you've got the amount that he's added to this team. I mean, not to go back to Orlando again, but I think about Banchero last year. He gets the rookie of the year. The Magic saw a bump, but not even as much as Chet saw. He wins the award. I would have expected Chet to maybe get a few more votes in that first place category, but any other year, I think he wins the rookie of the year because that team's a one seed, because he contributed and competed every single, didn't miss a whole lot of time either. I think that's another thing as well, is, after you miss the entire first season, because of course he's really in year 2 here. My expectations were that we would see him in and out of the lineup. So, the fact that he played as many games as he did, played at the level he did, and they were the one seed, it was an impressive season. I think any other year he wins that rookie of the year.
Dude, not only did Chet Holmgren play most of the games after he came off that surgery. And one of his big concerns was, can he match up with the NBA's physicality? Like, will he be able to handle it? He played all 82 games this season.
Did he play all 82?
I
Okay.
didn't realize that either. He played all 82 games for the Thunder this season. I mean, Wemby's got him beat most of the counting stats. Like Chet had 16 points, 7, almost 8 rebounds a game, 2.5 assists. Wemby was averaging 21 points a game, almost 4 assists, over 10 rebounds a game. And then it's just the blocks numbers too. Like the defense on Wemby is so ridiculous. Like, I've never seen a guy, and it happened multiple times. Like, I watched Wemby blow up 3-on-1 fast breaks, like where guys are just they go out to the perimeter. Like, and I know we're in an era where we kick it more to the 3-point shot, and where the 3-point shot has become such an even where it's not ridiculous on a fast break, but it's like really jarring to watch two NBA players. And somebody one day is going to really like try to climb the mountain on Wemby. And we'll get there, but man, oh man. It just, again, I'm worried for the rest of the league and the rest of us. Like, it just started, the kid is so good already. Like, I again was a believer that he was going to be more of a project. Like, I expected him to kind of have a year to, adjust to the speed, adjust to it's the NBA. It's the best players in the world, but that has not happened. And so that really is something to watch. Welcome everybody to the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rafuse. Again, Justin Cousart off this week. He will be back next episode. But in the meantime, holding it down for Justin is Nick Gryniewicz. Follow him on Twitter at GetNickG. Of course, G League season is over, but if you're checking out the Osceola Magic, you will hear Nick on the play-by-play on TV. It was great. You and Terrence Ross got to call a few games there down the stretch. How was that?
Yeah, final game of the year. T. Ross joined me. It was a lot of fun. He joined the Orlando Magic radio crew after that, so he kind of got his start with me, which was fun. But Terrence is a great analyst, and if he wants to do it, he's going to be really good. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah,
and I mean, I'm sure clearly getting the toes wet there a little bit. I know he's been trying to do a lot of the esports stuff as well, but. We will see, of course, if he pops up more and more in Orlando Magic broadcast. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad, or read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Player FM, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. Watch the video version of the podcast as well. We are on YouTube. Just search the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. And now a word from our sponsors. All right, so we are back officially in the second round, and we're going to do a little later on in the episode, so stay tuned for that, kind of an autopsy, because I imagine there are a substantial amount of our listeners who are waiting for my doom and gloom Sixers segment. So nevertheless, that will come later on when we talk about, kind of evaluate the teams that were eliminated in the first round. But with the second round upon us already, we want to dive into that as soon as possible. For the bracket, for anyone out west who is unfamiliar with it, just happened to miss the first round for some reason. The Thunder and the Mavericks are playing the Timberwolves and Nuggets. And then in the East, it's Celtics v. Cavs, Knicks v. Pacers. I'm going to start with Minnesota and Denver, not just because game one is in the books already as we're recording this podcast. I tweeted my prediction. It was before at Rafuse to lose on my Twitter, but I tweeted Denver in 7. So I want to say that was my pick, even with game one in the books, with Minnesota in the W. I'm not going to flip on that. I am going to stand on my prediction a little bit. But, wow, Minnesota coming out and winning game one. And I think they showed a lot of what would have been kind of in the preview going to it. It's like, what can you do with Jokic? And Minnesota is one of those rare teams that has the bodies between Gobert, between Towns, between Naz Reid, who can really, just make it difficult for them. And they did in game one. But my greater point too, Nick, is as we get into this series, because I do think it's going the distance. This is an absolute heavyweight fight. The winner of this series to me is probably your favorite to win the whole thing. Like, regardless of whether that's Denver or Minnesota, just given the quality of these rosters from top to bottom, like, they've passed every challenge. Denver obviously is the defending champion. Like, we know what they can do on this level as well. And one of the more fitting statements was, or kind of from last year that I think maybe people kind of scoffed at when they said it, was Denver was like, hey, our most difficult series was the first round against Minnesota, and Denver kind of like handled their business against Minnesota. I think it was a 5-game series last year. And so everyone kind of like looked at that and was like, really? It was Minnesota. It wasn't the Lakers. It wasn't, even Miami in the finals. Minnesota, give them credit for getting the personnel too, but these two squads, it looks like whoever's coming out of this is going to be the favorite to me.
Yeah, it feels like those years where Golden State and Houston would play either in the conference semis or the Western Conference Finals, and you're just thinking, okay, winner of this series is going to be your NBA champ, and that's how it feels here. I love Minnesota. I love Ant Edwards. He had 43 points in that first game. I mean, just he's having a coming out season. And it's going to be interesting to see how Mike Malone, Jokic, and Murray kind of figure out ways to take down this Minnesota team, because you're right, they have the bodies to throw at Jokic. So in my opinion, like, this is going to be who can carry their team more. Is it Ant Edwards or is it Jamal Murray? I think the better player between those two, whoever wins that duel, is going to win the series. And I think this thing's going 6 or 7 games. So it's going to be very entertaining. Game 2 is later tonight as we're taping this, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was, I would expect this to be 1-1. If we go back to Minnesota 2-0, Denver down, I'm going to be stunned.
Yeah, I am expecting it to be 1-1 as well. Again, just because it's in Denver, and that was a big reason, honestly, when you look at this matchup, we are splitting hairs at this point. And the biggest reason I lean towards Denver is it was his home court. Denver's traditionally been great on their home floor in a 7-game series. We saw it this weekend with Cleveland, right? I think that home court really matters in the last game of a series like that when it is so close. But you're right. If we got to reevaluate everything if they go down 2-0. You go down 2-0 back to Minnesota. At that point, all you got to do is get one on your home floor, and you got to feel pretty good about your chances to win that series. And when it's a defending champion, it would be jarring because Denver is playing well. That's the thing is,
oh yeah,
they're right there too. I don't want to downplay that. You look at how quickly they dispatched the Lakers, and more importantly, how efficient they were in the fourth quarter. Denver has been kind of playing with their food these playoffs early on in games. And it's funny because they kind of did
late in the season too. You mentioned that San Antonio loss. They kind of played with their food late in the season. They got bored, and it turned them into the 2 seed instead of the 1 seed. So, yeah.
It did. The good news for them is in this series, at least, it doesn't matter. But, look, Ant's been phenomenal. There's no way around it. It's him and Kobe with 2 40-point games in the playoffs under 23 years old. So anytime you're in company with Kobe, you got to feel pretty good. I'm really interested, like you said, to see the adjustments Mike Malone makes, whether that's leaning on Jamal Murray a little bit. Michael Porter kind of I liked his energy in game 1 overall, but, he kind of didn't have one to remember either. It was interesting because Jokic had 32 and 8 and 9, even where, it was kind of an off game for him. And maybe it wasn't even the offense, which is kind of crazy to see because they only scored 99 points, right? But it wasn't even the offense as much that concerned me here with Denver. It was the defense too. Minnesota shot over 52% from the field in game 1. That's really, I don't know. Denver's got to figure out something and maybe it's just make anybody but Ant beat us. Maybe you just start throwing more doubles at Ant. But the efficiency was a little alarming as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the big adjustments you make is, I think Mike Malone looks at Aaron Gordon and says, hey, anyone but this guy, as you just mentioned, you lock down Ant Edwards. And, I think on the defensive side, you have to ask yourself that question. And I tuned into quite a bit of that game, but I'm trying to remember if it was Aaron Gordon who defended Ant Edwards for most of that one, or if it was Jamal Murray. But that matchup there, if you can just make him work for it, and try to make it an inefficient game, he's going to get his, but it's just, can you make him work for it? So do you go to a guy like Aaron Gordon and say, hey, you're long, you're athletic, and, he's a very, very good defender, and at least try to match him that way with the wingspan? I would do that rather than put the burden on Jamal Murray, because you're going to need him on the offensive side too.
Yeah, you need him on the offensive side, and you need him, again, going back to defense. The Wolves kind of targeted him in the second half multiple times, so you're going to have to kind of figure out something there. again, I feel good about Denver overall in the second game. I really, really struggle to see them going down. I mean, again, not that just I picked them in the series, but like I struggle to see them going down 0-2 on their home court. Like they've been here before. And, maybe this wakes them up a little bit. Like it did feel they were kind of lethargic overall. Like the Wolves outwon the rebounding battle, but it was a lot of those loose ball battles too. Like the stuff that wins you playoff games. So you can't play with your food against Minnesota. Like whenever, I mean, I don't want to downplay Boston either, like Boston, because I think they just are such a clear favorite in the Eastern Conference at this point. But yeah, like this feels like the finals. So this would not be the series to play your food or play around with your food with. But give Minnesota credit. This is a team, they played playoff basketball here in the last few years, but this particular version is still relatively new. Only the second year with bringing Rudy Gobert in. Jaden McDaniels got hurt early on, self-inflicted, but got hurt early on in the playoffs last year. Now making an impact here. Like this team is ready to go. Give them credit. Like, for not having been here before. It really is saying something when I'm pretty confident that they're going to be my finals pick if they get past Denver.
Yeah, it's hard to take them seriously, though, I have to say. I mean, like, they've been such a sad sack franchise for so many years. Didn't
but make not this version.
They can't even sell the team right, Kevin. I mean, they can't sell the team correctly.
They've got Ant now. They've got the face of the league. It doesn't matter.
And that's the difference, is when you've got that guy that even Karl Anthony Towns looks at and says, that's the guy. It changes your entire franchise. It's amazing how one person can do that. But, you see them in this series and you have to take them serious. You go into Denver and win game one against the defending champs. Everyone has to mention at altitude, of course. That is a big time thing to get done. And, when we wake up tomorrow, it may be that it's, Denver's down 0-2.
It really is. And there's two things that crack me up, but they kind of go hand in hand. Anthony Edwards' biggest knock going into the draft was that like he doesn't like basketball a lot, and that wasn't going to translate. Clearly that hasn't been an issue. But you mentioned Karl Anthony Towns. One of the biggest things that's impressed me with Ant as well is that he's getting the best out of Karl Anthony Towns. Like he's pushed Cat to be the best version of himself. Like that whole interaction post game about Cat fouling too much and Ant saying, "Yo, knock off," like that's challenging him, but not also just like like for lack of a better phrase, like we know Cat's kind of fragile a little bit. Like you got to manage that, but Ant he's been a good leader. Like that is impressive with somebody that young to be able to have that sort of emotional intelligence. And you're getting the best out of him right now. Like again, 23 years old, the kid's gonna be the face of the league for a long time. Like, and like we said, we could be at a real chance of him getting into like elite territory if they get past this series.
Yeah, what I would say is there are reductive comments and productive comments, excuse me. And Edwards used productive comments there, right? So he's looking at Cat and he's like, how can I do this where I'm talking the big guy up rather than just saying, hey man, you're fouling all the time. And like, that's good teammate stuff. You're trying to kind of get him headed in the right direction without making it seem like he's hurting the team as much. And Cat has hurt the team with his fouls in the past.
Yeah, and I mean that's a guy who, I mean, when you talk about playoff pressure, Cat's somebody who has struggled with that in the past. Like he historically hasn't been the best version of himself in the playoffs. So far, so good. I mean, the other thing too is, and I've said this on the pod before, but man, Rudy Gobert, I apologize, buddy. Like I was calling that the worst trade in NBA history, and that's maybe the worst take I've ever had on this podcast. Like it's so beyond working for them at this point, and it was still a hefty fee, but like. Look, he looked unplayable in the playoffs at points with Utah, and you go back and you look at it now and you're like, maybe he just needed some perimeter defense. Like maybe it wasn't Rudy's fault. Like, I don't know. They really doubled down when they traded him on dominating that interior because they did against Memphis. Like that's what killed them 2 years ago in the playoffs. Like I understood that. My whole thinking was you draft Walker Kessler, a guy who's been pretty good early on in Utah, and you have all those picks. So it's like, what do you got to go trade Rudy for? But, the Rudy Gobert fans have always argued that it's well beyond the stat sheet. And I agree with that to an extent, but like, even I like, sometimes you just undersell it a little bit. Like Rudy's made a massive difference for this team.
Yeah, he really has. And I think the other thing that doesn't go discussed enough is how good Karl Anthony Towns has been playing in that 4 spot, because especially on the defensive end, like he just hasn't been a liability, which that was the problem. It was like, if you move him to 4, he doesn't have the athleticism to keep up with the athletic 4s, and then he doesn't have the size to play against some of the bigger 4s. And then that was kind of always the question. But he's done well in that spot too. Gobert, I was in the same place as you. Like I thought it was just a terrible trade. And it was, at this time last year was a terrible trade. But obviously they've figured it out, and they've gotten this team to the point where Gobert's defense, helps accentuate that offense too. So, they've turned it around.
I don't want to make this a one because it has kind of been a lot of Wolves back to back. But the one move I did love for them and that has worked, it just continues to work every night too, is Mike Conley. Like Mike Conley, the consummate veteran, really just from day one came in and kind of settled that locker room down. And, a lot of that I think comes from having played with Rudy in Utah. Like I think they're kind of, that certainly helped bridge the gap a little bit too. But, even with his comments before where it's like, hey, if y'all need a cause to rally around, like rally around me. I haven't been in the conference finals since 2012. And he's been on a lot of good teams. Like he's just that leader that they need as well. Like that wise sage, if you will, with all these kids. So, they, like you said, they've got a good thing going. Denver's the defending champs though. Like I don't want to undersell them at all. Like if I expect them to bounce back later. We'll see what happens when this pod drops. We'll see how that age. But again, I really struggle to see it be an 0-2, especially on Denver's home floor. And so the other series out west, of course, Oklahoma City Thunder and the Dallas Mavericks. OKC, the number 1 seed, as we mentioned, a lot of young talent there. Dispatching the Pels pretty easily in the first round. Dallas, of course, going against 6 of the Clippers, continuing their run of recent dominance against the Clippers. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving playing like you imagine they would when you brought them together. Like it's kind of best case scenario. But Dallas really in the second half has just brought it. And that's kind of why I'm high on them. Like I know OKC has been the better team over the course of the year, but Dallas I think is peaking at the right time. I don't know, Nick. I've got Dallas in 6 in this series. Like that sounds kind of crazy, but I'm in. I think they're clicking and doing what they need to do.
They look like it. That's for sure. And where I really struggle here is, are you going to continue to get this Kyrie Irving? The Kyrie that we've seen, I guess, throughout the season, but really over the last couple of weeks, and especially in the first round of the playoffs. That's, I think that Luke is getting more out of Kyrie than we saw LeBron get out of Kyrie. It just feels like he's, firing at all cylinders right now. And the question that I have is, can Oklahoma City throw enough defense? Can Lou Dort, I don't want to say shut down Luka, but can he slow down can he slow down Luka or Kyrie? I think that's the real question here right now is, if you're looking at just the scoring ability of the Dallas Mavericks, I think that they can beat this Oklahoma City team in 6 or even 7 games, because it's coming from so many different places. You've got Kyrie, you've got Luka. Oklahoma City, like it's Shea's series, that's Shea's series. And so they're going to really rely heavily on him.
Nick, I'm not going to lie. You flustered me big time when you said that, like Kyrie is getting more or Luka's getting more out of Kyrie than LeBron was. That kind of threw me for a second. I'm like, wait a minute. They beat a team that won 73 games. I don't know if I'm there yet, but this is definitely
it's one shot.
Kyrie's playing that was a big shot. I mean, they won the title, but no, they're definitely clicking right now. There's no way around it. I mean, this is the most focused you've seen Kyrie, it feels like, in a long time. And he's just healthy. I think the healthy has helped as well. Like he's been on the floor. They've been able to get these minutes together. A bit of good and bad news for Dallas. The good news is that Jason Kidd is locked up. I think some people will disagree with whether that's good news or not, but he's done a good job this year. The rumors are starting to flow. And if they're winning, it is hard to knock it a little bit. I don't know still how I feel about Jason Kidd as a head coach, but that's neither here nor there. The bad news confirmed no matter what is that Maxi Kleber's out with the shoulder injury, AC joint. He's going to miss 6 weeks minimum. So if they go further, there is a possibility he comes back. But he's given them, 20 plus minutes a game. And when you talk about their improved defense in the second half of the season, it was a pretty big part of that. And so that's going to be a big adjustment there for Dallas. But You mentioned Lou Dort. I think you're spot on there. Like, I think Lou Dort is the most important player in the series, as crazy as that sounds. And that's wild with Luka and SGA. And so maybe I'm jumping off the cliff a bit there. But when you talk about what OKC's going to have to do defensively, like, this is his brand of basketball. Like, this is what he's known to do, is terrorize the perimeter. And they're going to need him all over Kyrie. Like, I'm not suggesting that you're going to shut him down. You're definitely not going to shut Luka down. But if you can limit them, make their life difficult, make them have to put up a lot of shots, then, that is one of the keys here for, I think, if Oklahoma City wants to win.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I think also, like, it's Chet, can he stay out of foul trouble? Because that Kyrie and Luka are both going to be, getting into the middle of the lane. They're going to be driving to the hoop. And so can Chet stay out of foul trouble? Can, Oklahoma City keep their core together throughout this series? Because we've seen it time and time again against Dallas. Like, Luka's so good at drawing fouls. Kyrie is so good off the dribble and getting around defenders. It's very easy for them to get up close and score. So, I think you're right. Lou Dort, is he the most important? Maybe it's not the most important, but he's probably the third or the fourth. His name's coming up a lot sooner than we would have expected him to come up, because his perimeter defense is going to be paramount. Maybe not, as you said, not to stop Kyrie, but make him inefficient, like make him work for it. Because over a 6 or 7 game series, like, that effort takes a toll. We've seen that plenty of times. So it's definitely going to be a fun matchup. I think this one will be close. I think it'll be 6 or 7 games as well. The Western Conference was just so deep this year. It was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the play-in teams, you talk about Sacramento, Golden State, like, they're all at 46 plus wins. The East, for the most part, was kind of there too, but the fall off after 8 was significantly higher in the East. But with this series, to me, it's about the supporting cast too, more than anything with Dallas. Like, we know what Luka and Kyrie are going to do. I think, in a way, if you can't slow them, there may almost be that other option where it's like, hey, you just defer and realize that they're going to get what they're going to get, but we're going to try to slow down the Daniel Gaffords of the world, the Tim Hardaways, the PJ Washingtons of the world. And, if Dallas can get contributions out of them, you got to feel good about your shot in this. But Oklahoma City also, again, this has been a top 5 defense all season. Like, they've kind of got the personnel to switch everybody. So from a matchup perspective, that'll help. Obviously, Chet's been phenomenal defensively this year as well. So this is going to be a good series. Like, no matter what, I do think it's, like, I do feel like, again, not to keep beating the bush here, but I think the other series is going to be the favorite. I hope whoever comes out of this, but this is an extremely compelling matchup on its own. Like, I think we're looking at 2 kind of heavyweight fights here in the second round for the Western Conference. So should be a lot of fun. Again, I'm going Dallas in 6. You have any inclination? I know you said you was going 6 and 7. You kind of lean in OKC, you lean Dallas.
They're so young. I think I'll go Oklahoma City in 7. But if Dallas wins the series, I wouldn't be surprised. But OKC showed they were the best team in the West throughout the regular season. I'll ride with them here. I think it's another close one, and Dallas just kind of runs out of steam.
Yeah, it's tough with me because at OKC, at some point, because that's always my holdup too, is that they've just never been here before. At some point that youth is going to kick in, but it hasn't, and it keeps not kicking in. And I mean, against New Orleans, different story there. Like, I did feel like they were going to handle their business with New Orleans. I still think they could beat Dallas, but for me, this is the first, like, real battle-tested fight that they're going to have in the playoffs. And I'm excited to see what OKC, like, they're going to come out of it better no matter what. But I am excited to see what OKC can do here. But let's go over East a little bit. I want to start with Knicks Pacers just because, it's kind of funny. The Knicks and Sixers was like quintessential 90s basketball. And now you've got a classic 90s rivalry back here in effect in the second round with the Knicks and the Pacers. The Knicks beating the Sixers in 6, the Pacers upsetting the Bucks in 6. I think with Dame obviously missing time, with Giannis missing time, that's, for most NBA people, we know that's less of an upset than most would expect it to be when you look at the lineups on paper. But, look, we know what the story with Indy's been all year. Indy loves to get out and run. They're going to try to fast break. They don't really play defense, though. The Knicks, it's all about the depth. That really was they swarm the Sixers with bodies consistently. We know they love crashing the offensive boards. They did take a bit of a hit, that depth did, with Bogdanovich officially being out for the rest of the season. He was dealing with that wrist injury, but then the ankle injury, like, he got hurt I think, diving for a loose ball and a fast break, and that kind of sealed it there. But my preseason or pre-series, I should say, prediction was Knicks in 6. Look, I mean, the Knicks handling the Sixers the way they did, and with their depth, I just feel like creating extra possessions, the heater that Brunson's on right now, like it feels like they can carry over this Indy team. Indy, one of their big advantages the first round against Milwaukee was Siakam. Siakam was excellent that entire series. Again, it's kind of like Embiid, though. Like the Knicks have the personnel to be able to throw bodies at him between Hartenstein, between Mitch Robinson, even with Precious Achiuwa in a pinch if they need to. Hallie's been good. He's slowed down a little bit in the second half, but again, it's going to be all about pace for the Indy team. But it's hard not to be impressed by the Knicks, and just their overall focus and energy is high right now. Like that's what I think carried them late in the games against the Sixers too. Like their execution was just there. They're playing hard under Tibbs. So I don't know. I just think they have a little more firepower than the Indy team does.
Yeah, I think anytime you have a team that's focuses on defense the way the Knicks is, and it's not like they can't score, you're going to see the team that leans on defense win the series. I've got the Knicks in 5. I think that the Knicks win this series in 5. Halliburton hasn't been the same guy really since the injury. I think that the Knicks bodies that they can throw at Indy, as you mentioned, are going to slow them down. And I got to be honest, I love the Villanova connection. I was calling Big East basketball games when all those guys were in school. I love Jalen Brunson. I love the other, I love Hart. I love DiVincenzo. Those guys are just fun to watch. They play hard. It is a bit of a throwback to kind of the 90s with them. So, and not to mention as a, former Chicago guy, I got a soft spot for Tibbs. So I can, the NBA is just better when the Knicks are good, and it'd be great to see them in the Eastern Conference Finals. So I think that they're going to win this series pretty convincingly, like 5 games.
Yeah, I think I forget what their record is, but trust me, when it's extremely high, when Dante DiVincenzo hits more than 2 3-pointers a game. So that is something to watch. I mean, Josh Hart in the first round, like you want to talk about, I mean, he was shooting around like 31% for the beyond the arc throughout the regular season, was hitting well over a 40% clip. I mean, I think he was over 4 in almost every game except the last one there for the Knicks. To close out that series, though, he hit the big 3-pointer at the end of that series in game 6 to end it. I mean, it was kind of fitting that he hit that shot given how well he played in that first half. Obviously, OG Anunoby's been phenomenal as well. We know what he does on the defensive end. Pacers, the bench is going to be interesting. You try to get that's a bench that already took a hit when Mathurin went out. They've been dealing with that in the second half of the season. Former Nick, Obi Toppin, you're going to be leaning on a little bit. CJ McConnell, guys like that are going to have to step up if they want to have any chance of no pun intended, keeping pace here. It'll be entertaining. Like I do think this is not going to be a blowout matchup. I do think the Knicks are going to win this series like kind of convincingly, but I think it's going to be like an entertaining 6 games. I don't think it's going to be our second series here, Celtics Cavs, which I mean that's the one I think is going to be over quick. And obviously the big story with the Celtics is Porzingis going down with the calf strain. Obviously a little bit of relief with that not being a lot worse. And I know it sounds kind of weird after the Cavs just beat the Magic in 7 games to be like, hey, I think that's a worse matchup overall quality-wise. But I just think Orlando's defense would have translated a little bit. Like, I don't think the Cavs – like, Donovan Mitchell really impressed me in Game 7 to close that out. Like, give him credit. He put the team on his back a little bit. Without Porzingis – maybe it's a little more intriguing. Jared Allen's missed a few of these games. You got to hope you get him back. You hope Evan Mobley turns it up. But, I mean, Evan hasn't so far. I mean, outside of that Game 5 block, which was huge, like, he's been kind of disappointing. That'd be how you take advantage of Boston without Porzingis out. But, like, look, even without KP, that might bite them in later rounds. But this feels like the perfect series for Boston to kind of let him get right. Because I just think they're going to cruise.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Styles make fights, and I think Orlando's style would have made for a better fight against Boston. I don't think they would have beaten Boston, and I don't think the Cavs are going to either. I think this is another 5-game series in the East, and I think Boston takes care of business without Porzingis. The Celtics don't need Porzingis to win the East. They need him to win a title. That's the big difference. And so, I think that they'll end up beating Cleveland and then one of Indy, or who I think the Knicks, even without Porzingis, though it feels like he might be back in time for, the rest of the Eastern Conference playoffs here, depending on who you read or, what the report is. But they need him in order to win the title. That's for sure.
Yeah, they definitely need him to win the title. I'll tell you what, though, I still think they're the favorites in the East no matter what. There's no planet where I'm about to back off that hill. Like, I think the bracket couldn't really have broken better for them. And look, that's also the advantage of when you dominate the regular season and win it by what? 12 or 13 games, whatever their final lead on the Eastern Conference was. Like, they're reaping the luxuries of that. But yeah, the way the brackets broke with Miami losing Jimmy, with the Sixers being out, with the Heat, or with the Bucks, I should say, being out, with the Giannis injury, like, they may need KP against the Knicks. Like, that's the thing, is like, if the Knicks get by Indy, the Knicks are frisky. And honestly, if the Pacers get by the Knicks, I'm not going to rule the Pacers out either. Like, the Pacers are frisky. I don't think they're going to beat Boston in a series, but I think they can irritate the hell out of Boston in a series. And if Porzingis is out, those series where they can irritate you start to get a little weirder, But yeah, I agree with it 100%. Like, if you're going to beat the top dog out of that Western Conference and those 4 teams that we talked about that are still playing, you're going to need Porzingis. Like, he's been one of their key guys all year. I know they've got Jaylen Brown and Tatum. I know Derek White and Drew have been great at times too. And, that's part of why we're so high on the Celtics. Like, their top end is so high, but Porzingis just adds that different level to their offense. Like, they having that, consistent post up interior threat, that just without that layer, you still got Al Horford, but like, Al's just older at this point. Like, he's been more effective off the bench. They're going to need him in that finals matchup 100%. But I mean, do we give the Cavs any sort of credit here? Like what on earth can they possibly do to make this competitive, I guess?
I think it's they're gonna have to show more defense than they did in the game than the games in Orlando at the very least. Like, I think you come away from that series against the Magic, and other than Game 7, the Magic lost a lot of those games because they didn't shoot the ball well. It wasn't necessarily Cleveland defense that got the job done. So I think that they're going to have to show that they can put the clamps on the Celtics. And without Porzingis, you probably get into a few more bad sets for Boston where it's a Tatum step back fall away jumper that he leaves short off the front of the iron or something. We've seen that for his entire career. But I think for Cleveland, it's going to be defense. And then one thing that I saw quite a bit in that Orlando series, they turned the ball over in bunches. And you have to take care of the ball against the Celtics because they move it so well and they have so many guys, Tatum, Brown, Derek White, like they can just beat you in transition too. So those are 2 big things. And of course, they're going to have to ride Donovan Mitchell. Like, Mitchell had 50 in a game, So, I mean, he's going to have to continue to play well, and he's going to have to outplay Tatum and Brown.
See, it's funny. Like, Donovan Mitchell, I kind of know what we're going to get at this point. Like, to me, it is about the other guys. Like, it's about Garland. Like, what can you get out of him? It's about Evan Mobley. What can you get out of him? Like, can Karis LeVert be an X factor off the bench? I thought he was really good in Game 7. Gave them a spark when they kind of needed it early on. A guy like Max Strus, who's been here before, playing a lot of high level minutes with Miami in the past. Like, can he step up? Give them a threat from beyond the arc as well. But I mean, yeah, they're going to need all that and more to go right in this series. Donovan can get you one, and that's kind of what I'm giving them credit for here in that one game. Like, he'll go on a heater at home. Boston's role players just don't. But like, that could put it this way, Nick. I'm leaning closer to that series being a sweep than I am to it going 6.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I have it as a 5-game series. You're right. Donovan gets them 1 game, and that's about it. But I think Boston is going to cruise here. And, I look at the other 2 coaches in the Eastern Conference side. You're right. Without Porzingis, Rick Carlisle and Tom Thibodeau will at least pick at the scabs for the Celtics, make it difficult on them. But I think the series against the Cavs is going to be a relatively simple one for Boston.
Did you know that Rick Carlisle, that was his first playoff series win since the Mavs won the title in 2011?
They only mention on the broadcast 200 times, but it's shocking every time I hear it because
it's insane. He's a good coach. How did that happen?
I know. I don't know. Like, they won that title, and then the Mavs did absolutely nothing, and then he ended up in Indy. It's a surprise how quickly time goes by. I mean, like, what year was that? Was that 20?
It's 2011 when they won the title.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was. I mean, this podcast,
we're getting old, buddy.
We're going on year 11 right now, and that was 2.5 full seasons before we started this podcast. Like, it was. Yeah, that it's just because Dallas was, and again, they blew that team up after they won the title for the most part. Like, they let Tyson Chandler walk. A lot of guys retired, but you still thought like they were still competitive with Dirk. Like, you would have thought they won a playoff series there. Like, I know they weren't going back to the conference finals and winning titles or anything, but like, you would think they'd win one. With Indy, yeah, you get that. Like, Indy's never been bad. They've made the playoffs over these last few years, but besides the year with Oladipo was the best year they were, when he had his fully healthy year and was an all-star, and like, that was the best Indy team recently until this year. This year obviously has been the exception to that, but I couldn't believe that.
It makes me think, when was the last time Greg Popovich won a playoff series? Like, well-tenured coaches that we consider like top 5, top 10 guys in the league. Like, Carlisle and Pop both are on that list.
Pop won. They had to have won at least the last year. No, because they won the year with the Warriors. They because that was the year Kawhi's ankle, or he stepped on Zaza, right? Well, they were in the Western Conference Finals, and they were on the verge of taking Game 1. I think they did take Game 1, but he stepped on his ankle, and so it didn't matter. The rest of the series didn't matter. Like, and it was kind of intriguing because that was one of the Durant years when it was going to be like, yo, wait a minute, can they actually do this right now? Like, can someone knock the KD Warriors out? And obviously that didn't end up happening. Then the series pretty much over at that point, but. Yeah, you're not wrong with some of them. Though, I mean, I guess, the other top tenured guys, like obviously Kerr's just won the finals a few years ago, has always been close. Right. Spo was just in the finals last year. I mean, yeah, either way though, just such a crazy stat to think of when he's been around and pretty much coaching this entire time. But
Nick Nurse, how long's it been for Nick Nurse?
No, he won, I want to say 3 years ago. He had when did he stop
giving you a hard time?
Leave me alone, man. It's been hard enough. Like, haven't I been through enough in the past 7 years? Like, everyone keeps telling me like, oh, the Sixers went out with honor this year, and Embiid played great, and Maxey played great, and there's a lot to be excited about. And all that is true. Like, the Sixers have way more cap space than I think only Detroit has a higher amount of cap space this year. And that's the only reason I think everyone in Philly isn't more like completely apoplectic at this point. But this is pretty much like the Sixers at this point, you can fairly say, have squandered the first half of Joel Embiid's career. Now, the question is, like, what can you do with the second half? You've got Maxey, you've got your two superstars now. Can you fill out the depth here? Like, can you give them the quality depth to go on a run consistently? And there's a way to salvage it. If they like blow it this offseason the way they did back in 2019, then it's over. Like, it's just not going to happen in this window then. And I'm still kind of the belief that you shouldn't give this team any credit at this point. But, at least when you look at two, all of a sudden Jimmy Butler's situation in Miami has become a little volatile out of nowhere. Pat Riley today saying Jimmy shouldn't be talking if he's not playing. That was crazy to hear. Obviously, all the Paul George comments have been going around too. Or Paul George rumors post Clippers, but that's kind of where I want to, as we move into the second half of the episode, I want to talk about some of these teams here a little bit that have been eliminated. So officially, of course, in the East, you've got the Bucks being out, you've got the Sixers being out, you've got the Heat being out, and you've got the Magic being out. And when we talk about levels of despair, there's a clear winner of we're fine, actually, and that's Orlando. Because Orlando, I think the only reason you're even a little bit remotely disappointed as a Magic fan is just because you were up by 18 points in Game 7. Like, that's pretty brutal when you have that lead and have a chance to close it out on their floor. That would have been huge. Like, Paolo Banchero played an absolutely phenomenal Game 7, and that's something that you can hang your hat on. Is it's like, hey, our superstar is indeed a superstar. I think the other things you look at and go, hey, Franz Wagner was horrible. Jalen Suggs was horrible. Like, they're going to learn from this. They're going to grow. You saw them play great in multiple playoff games. Like Orlando won all their games on their home floor. You know, they have moves to make. Like they got to do a little more at guard for sure. Like I would love to see them go out and get a true point guard this offseason.
Sure.
I think, of course, you can upgrade the big position. Like Wendell Carter's played admirable minutes for them, but you want to see them do a little more there. But when I look at like winning a first round series for Orlando would have been this year, like they've already so far, in my opinion, surpassed our expectations that them winning a first round series, like it would have been beyond that in my eyes. Like this has already been this season was such a massive success for the Orlando Magic. Like I don't think there's any the only remote bitterness I have is just recency because we had a real shot to win that game 7.
Yeah. I mean, like this is the first time that the Magic now have expectations moving forward since 2012 when Dwight Howard left.
Yeah.
You think about it, they checked all the boxes this year. You figured out whether or not Banchero was a dude. Absolutely, he is. They have some changes that they need to make. Of course, you got to go out and, as you said, you got to go find a true point guard. In my opinion, I think I'm a Markelle Fultz fan, but I also think that Markelle is more of a backup guard than he is a leading point guard in the league, and maybe make some adjustments, as you said, like around the center position, but. I think that you're going to have a chance to go out and make a play for some big names during the offseason. The same guys that you're mentioning for Philly, why not Orlando? I mean, when you have a guy like Banchero, the same way when we were talking about Wemby earlier, guys are going to want to come play with Paolo Banchero. Like he is a legit all-star in this league or headed towards being one. So it was a tough loss. You're right. Being up by 18 points. The end of that first half, when they got it down to 10, you were kind of like, all right, you could kind of feel it coming a little bit. And, it was just a nightmare game for both, Magic guards there, for Franz Wagner and the rest of that Magic young team. But, it's, Suggs being the other one. It's usually when you have an organically built team like Orlando does, you got to go through some heartache in the playoffs. That's what we used to see throughout NBA history is, MJ had to go through the Pistons. He had to go through the Celtics and all that, same way with Orlando. Like, next year you'll look to, can we host a series? Can you have that game 7 at home? That'll be the next goal next year.
Yeah, and there's some pressure on them a little bit in this offseason to get things right. But regardless, there's a lot of time. Like there's only reasons to be positive about the future in Orlando with them being eliminated. Again, the sting from that loss will go away a little bit, especially when you compare it to the other 3. Like when you look at Miami, when you look at the Sixers, when you look at Milwaukee, I think my final despair rankings that I settled on were, and maybe I'm biased, I had Sixers 1, Milwaukee 2, Miami 3. Though Miami, I'll tell you what, if Jimmy goes, Miami all of a sudden, like I have all the faith in the world in Spo in that front office just because they've continued to build winners all the time. But like if Jimmy walks, that window's over. And that's a real crazy way to end a window that's seen them go to 2 NBA finals. Like it's just it's bizarre to be happening now. Like I know he was injured, but it's like, he was and the regular seasons they punted, but it's like, you kind of got to give them credit even in that play-in game. Like if Jimmy's healthy, who knows if they beat the Sixers, and if they beat the Sixers and are playing against the Knicks, like again, a lot of what ifs here, but that's kind of weird for all of a sudden the benefit of the doubt to go away. Right.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's time to take the microphone away from Pat Riley. He is, the godfather in the NBA. He has a lot of rings, and he has recruited a lot of guys to Miami. But you don't go toe-to-toe with your superstar over a couple of post-game or pre-game comments. Like, to me, it just feels silly for the position that Miami's in. And I know that he wants a contract extension. I wonder whether or not this is Pat Riley already preparing for, that they're going to have to move him because they don't want to pay him more, or, do a contract extension. But this feels like Pat Riley kind of playing games, and they're not in a position where they can. Like, I don't know, sans Jimmy Butler, I get it. You've got Bam and you've got Tyler Hero, but like there isn't much really there to attract another, top tier star. Like LeBron James isn't walking through that door. The reincarnation of Dwayne Wade's career isn't walking through that door. Chris Bosh has been gone a long time. So I think that, Pat Riley at this point, make up with your guy. You need him there, and you need to use him, to lure another guy to Miami to try to be competitive. But,
yeah.
If you look at situations of the teams that went out this week, Miami, I think, has the worst situation. Like Milwaukee still has Giannis, Maxey, and Embiid in Philly. Miami, they've got Jimmy Butler, who's played, heavy minutes in his career, and this could just be the start of that downturn of his career.
Yeah, and look, I understand it. Like Jimmy Butler, we're talking about, he wants a 2-year deal. He's going to be 35 by the end of it. Like this is a guy who has dealt with a fair amount of injuries over his career. Like there's wear on those tires at this point. But, if your window's open, you need him. Like you're fully accepting that we the Miami Heat are going into rebuild mode. And if that happens, like I do look at everything. Like Bam and Hero that have value now. Like, are you going to hold on to them and think they're still going to meet your timeline as you rebuild here a little quickly? I know Miami is obviously been great at finding guys in the rough and been at attracting this talent. Like Miami's going to get a meeting, I think, with any NBA free agent that hits the market. But you're right. Like if Jimmy walks, it does lose a little bit of luster as a destination as well. Like there's a lot of teams with great weather as well, and you can still win games. It would just be weird. I'm not totally reading into this yet. Like I don't think they're going to move Jimmy Butler still. I think that's a lot of smoke, but I think teams are going to watch. Like it is. Yeah. And there is risk with this. Jimmy is older now. Like this is not when Jimmy left the Sixers where he was still on the right side of 30. Like, Jimmy Butler will be old and you're giving him a lot of money, but I still am always going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like as long as he continues to rise in playoff games, I'm always going to believe in the guy. The Sixers despair. And again, it just goes back to the fact that, like, for me, I don't even feel like they went out that sad. Like, the Knicks' depth was better than ours. I think Embiid was phenomenal in the elimination game. I thought his effort was there for most of the series. Like, it didn't feel like he just gave up. Obviously, Tyrese gives you a super cool moment in game 4, or game 5, I should say. You love to see him take over in the Garden like that. It's more of just, like, it's the just repetitiveness of it. Like it's been 7 years of losing in the playoffs, like in the second and in the first rounds, like did not get to the conference finals. And like, again, sure, you can take the silver lining if they didn't get punked this year the way they have in past years, but like, that's just a hard sell to everybody right now. Like they better get the off season right with the cap. Like, I think that's the way everybody views it. And, everyone, I get why Joel's frustrated with the amount of Knicks fans in the Garden, but the analogy I always say best is like a Philly guy is like, look, you go to an Eagles playoff game, that's not happening. You go to a Phillies playoff game, that's not happening. It's happening with the Sixers because the fans are just, you reached apathy point. Like you go through the process and accept the losing on purpose to have continued playoff success, and you just haven't had it. Like the team hasn't had a memorable playoff moment really since I was in like 4th grade. Like they made the finals of the Iverson in 2001. And since then it's like they've won playoff series, but it's usually been against teams that they've been significantly better than. And they've lost a lot of series where it's either been in spectacular fashion or it's been the 50-50 series where it's like, how did you end up losing this? The one to Atlanta sticks out the most in that regard. Like I will never forgive them for losing the Hawks in 2021. And Hawks fans can blow me up in my mentions. I don't care. We were so much better than that team. It was just an unbelievable meltdown. And then the Bucks are just in a weird spot because it just didn't feel like it worked at all at any given point. Like once they brought in Doc, it only got worse, but it's like the Dame and Giannis fit was awkward all year. They'll have time to figure it out. They both got hurt, but it's like a lot of their core is getting old. So I think in terms of the only reason they're not higher for me is because they won the title a few years ago. Like it's as simple as that. Like that's the only reason I don't have them over the Sixers, but I think there's a lot of questions there going forward. Like Dame is getting older. Chris Middleton is getting older. Brook Lopez is getting older. Even Bobby Portis is starting to get older at this point. Like it just didn't click at any point this year. Like whether it was with Adrian Griffin, whether it was Doc Rivers, like there's a lot of questions going forward. And I am surprised because like that Dame Giannis matchup seems like it should be basketball nirvana and it just wasn't.
Yeah, I probably would have Milwaukee number one on this list. Like, was the Dame Lillard trade worth it? Because not only did you shuffle all the cards, but also it ended up with Drew Holiday going to the Boston Celtics, right? So you made them even tougher as well with part of it. The injury issues with Giannis and with Dame, you expect that to be better moving forward, but both of those guys they're getting older, and so with Giannis, you still expect him to be just fine. But with Dame, small guard, a lot of minutes on him. He's been around the league a while. Like, who knows if this gets any better? And with the amount that you're paying him, can you continue to build around that core? And Middleton, kind of same thing. He missed time this year. So I think if you're Milwaukee, you're looking around, and also you're not the superstar destination like Philadelphia or even Miami that we were talking about. Milwaukee's not getting a lot of meetings with guys unless they're coming because they want to be there with Giannis, which is a pull, but still at the end of the day, it's Milwaukee. It's the nicest suburb of Chicago, but still it's Milwaukee. It's Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
There's some old school. See, I'm not from that area, so I know that relationship a little bit, but I can't say so because I've been in neither of those cities ever. But like I like that from a Chicago guy, a little bit of spice there. Yeah, I mean, like, look, you have Giannis, you're always going to get elite players in the room because I think he's still one of the best players in basketball. But yeah, it's more about the core to me, and it's about the assets. Like, they gave up a lot to get Drew Holiday initially, won a title, so obviously worth it every single time. But like, now you're at the point too where you traded for Dame. Like, the war chest is kind of burnt. Like, some of these guys have value, but like, they don't have a reset the franchise type value. So I think that's definitely going forward to watch with Milwaukee. I have them over Miami. I'm with you as well. I think at worst they're two. I'm probably biased, but same sort of deal. Let's go out west. The four teams eliminated, of course, the Pelicans, the Clippers, the Suns, and the Lakers. All four there's no Orlando in this group. I think there's a fair amount of despair with all of these teams. Yeah. I guess number one for me, so it's weird because I have two separate schools of thought on this. My number one for the Clippers is that it hasn't worked now. Kawhi got hurt again. The 1 year he was healthy, it was going great, but you just, unfortunately you lost. But it's been a lot of years now of we gave up all our assets rightfully. Like, that was a good decision to push in like that, but it's like we just lost in the first round again. Like, coming off Lob City, never being able to get over the hump, that's a lot of playoff failure back to back to back. And so I think in that sense, there's number one. But the other part of me is the Suns, because the Suns are just screwed from a maneuverability standpoint. Like,
yeah, they are.
You've got Durant, Booker, Nurkic, and Bradley Beal making all this money. You have no ability to go out and get depth now. You just lost in the first round, and not just lost in the first round. You got swept out of the first round by a team that you matched up pretty well against in the regular season, and then who just came out and completely took your lunch money. And the problem is here's the thing where I think it's a little, we talked about guys that you could trade and reset the franchise a little bit. Phoenix has plenty of that. Like, you move Kevin Durant, you're getting multiple first rounders back still. You move Booker, obviously, you're getting the King's ransom. But that's a ridiculous sentence. Like, I'm going to move Devin Booker. Like, Devin Booker is one of the best young players in the NBA who's about to enter his prime. Like, you don't have any flexibility with Beal. Beal is still a good player, I think, but because of his contract, you don't have any flexibility there. And so that's what I think is killing you. Like,
are we sure Beal's still a good player?
Not enough.
I mean,
not relative to his
when
salary.
He doesn't play enough. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the concern is it's like, look, he's due $50 million multiple times over the next few years. Like, he got that heavy Supermax contract from the Wizards, who, good for them, we're now in hindsight able to get it off their books. But yeah, I mean, look, I loved the idea of Beal, Booker, and Durant, and I think you saw flashes of it. But I think you can also say consistently so far it hasn't worked. And because, like, again, if Beal truly is washed, you're stuck with a bad contract. Even Durant is getting older at this point. Now, again, I think KD still has tons of value. Like, there are plenty of teams that would trade for Kevin Durant in a second. But, like, he's a guy now that has lost here in the playoffs in a few times. Like, Booker, to me, is your number one guy. But if you're trading Booker, like, we're in a weird spot because then I'm getting a lot of picks back more than anything. And it's like, we're going all in to win with KD and Bradley Beal. Like, that's not really what we're here for either.
I think if you're trading Booker, KD's going to. I think trading Booker, exactly. You're blowing the whole thing up. And then what you're doing is you're getting assets back and probably attaching an asset to Beal to get him the hell off your books too. Does he have a no trade? I feel like Beal has a no trade clause too.
He did with Washington. I don't know if he waived it since going to Phoenix. I'll have to check that real quick. So. But yeah,
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. It's not ideal. And you're right.
No, because you could send him to like Detroit, right? That's what you would normally do. Is like
I love how we just
every San Antonio,
Detroit, like every bad overplay. Like Tobias Harris is finally off his overpaid, bloated contract, and it's like, oh, where's he going? Detroit right away. We're sending him to Detroit.
Back to Detroit. They had him once already.
No, I know they should have kept him. It would have been a perfect fit. Tobias Harris scoring 0 points in an elimination game is the most fitting end to Tobias's era because he never really got enough credit. And again, this is not his fault. He should have absolutely accepted this contract. That Tobias Harris contract has been one of the most crippling contracts. Like, it's arguably the worst contract in Sixers history. I think it's up there as one of the worst in NBA history. Listen, man, like that never got enough credit. And I think the national media finally caught on, like, for all the reasons the Sixers have underachieved, like, it's also because they've been paying Tobias Harris $40 million every year to be like maybe a top 100 player in the NBA. Like, all they needed was any sort of third guy to step up beyond Embiid and Maxey, and he's just completely unable to at this point. But yeah, the Suns is tough. Like, and that's why I'm inclined to put them one over the Clippers. Like, the Clippers,
they're number one.
You could be off Paul George's salary. I know there's Russell Westbrook drama. Harden is Harden. Like, there's a lot going on there, but I'm still, again, inclined to go Suns number one. You know, Lakers and Pelicans, I borderline lean Pelicans more, and that's kind of crazy to think about because the Lakers got absolutely demolished by the Nuggets, who just, that's what they do. Like, the Nuggets have demolished them for 2.5 years now. With the Pelicans, though, like, you kind of had everybody. I know Zion got hurt, but it's like, you know, Ingram was kind of bad in the playoffs this year. CJ McCollum was kind of bad in the playoffs this year. Like, all this young group that you thought was going to take off, like, when you have to constantly worry about the risk with Zion, but even your supporting cast hasn't really taken the steps you needed. Like, you have a bunch of questions there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, like, I don't really know where you go from here. It's funny with all four of these teams, I don't really know where you go. But if you're the Pelicans, I think it's time to move on from Brandon Ingram. I don't expect him to be on the team next year. I think you have to start building around Zion just differently. CJ McCollum really has not taken the step that you expected him to take post-Portland run as well. And I just kind of look at both those guys as they're nice regular season players, but when you get into the playoffs, there are plenty of other guys, plenty of other duos out there that are going to out-duel you. So the Pelicans are in that weird spot where you're good enough to make the playoffs. You're good enough to be competitive in the regular season, but not good enough to really compete for in NBA finals. It's nice, but you're not going to really, you're not going to the Western Conference Finals anytime soon. And Zion, albeit dealing with, some injuries, he's only going to have this bounce for a limited amount of time. Like, he's on a shorter timeline than everybody else. Like, he's not going to play late into his 30s, or he's not going to play into his mid 30s. So I would almost hit the reset button if I were them. Get rid of Ingram, get rid of McCollum, and from there, see if you can get some young guys. They got to nail the draft, of course, but get some young guys in there around Zion and see whether or not you can come up with a new recipe.
Yeah, Ingram, I think, still has a lot of value, like, off the name. I still think there's a lot of, because Ingram's had some good years. I think I'm starting to see some concern, but I still think there's a lot of people who would take the swing on Brandon Ingram, get him out of New Orleans, just take the upside. He'll cost, obviously, like, that is the thing, but he's under a contract now too. So that, I think, has a little bit as well. Like, it won't be a 3 or 4 first round pick type haul or anything ridiculous like that.
Maybe an LA reunion. Maybe you send him back to the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, they're another team where, they just have kind of screwed up around the margins. Like, I guess that's more or less what's got them here in the last few years. Like, unfortunately, their mistake was just it was letting Caruso walk, and it was trading Kuzma and KCP basically for Russ. Like, that obviously aged kind of instantly pretty bad. Caruso letting walk, like, Caruso got a lot of money. It turns out like he's really good. Like, they have missed him so much. To be quite honest, I'm surprised your Bulls haven't tried to flip him, but I think no one really knows what Chicago is doing at this point.
What is Chicago doing? Yeah, they don't know what they're doing.
They don't know what they're doing exactly. They want to make the playoffs and flirt in the play-in games so they can get that like little play-in bonus money, and then they can just shut it down for the season. They don't want to go too far into June. Like, I don't know what Chicago is doing. Like, you tell me. It doesn't seem like they have a direction at all. This was the perfect team to blow up. And they just didn't at all. Like, they kept everybody.
Yeah, they did. And you're right about Caruso with LA. Those three guys you mentioned, KCP, Kuzma, all of those moves made them worse. I would say the Zubac trade also made them worse. Now, that's kind of a bigger throwback. They gave him away for nothing, like a second-round pick.
Yeah.
And he's a quality big in the league, too. So they have done themselves a disservice, as you said, in the margins. They've got LeBron, they've got AD. You have to build the team now, though, assuming that LeBron can't take over a playoff series anymore. You know, you kind of used to build the team saying, we just need to get to the playoffs, then LeBron is going to go zero dark, 23 or whatever number he is now, and then he's going to take care of business and get us to the finals. But he's not at that stage of his career anymore.
No, he's not. But I mean, give credit to him because, I mean, again, at 39 years old, doing things that we haven't seen before, and he did carry them for portions. The crazy part about the Nuggets series is they didn't even play that terrible. Like, I know they blew that one game, but the Nuggets are just so efficient at the end of games that's where they beat them. They just consistently out-executed the Lakers in crunch time. And I mean, you saw the frustration get to them. Like, Anthony Davis played great this year. Like, his biggest knock has been durability. Like, he was basically in every game this year. Like, I think he really checked that box for the first time. But yeah, they're, as long as you have those two guys, they're not quite as, and again, the Lakers have that luxury of they're going to be one of those we're always getting a meeting team. So I think that gives them a boost as well. Quick look at the Pelicans cap sheet, by the way. Brandon Ingram is a free agent next season.
That's what I thought. I thought he was a free agent. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. 25, 26, he's a free agent. So he is on the books for next year. So he only has 1 year left. So that actually, you could probably, it's tough because he only has 1 year, nobody's going to give up a ton for a rental, right? But you won't really have to attach anything if you want to move on from Brandon Ingram. McCollum has 2 years left. That's a little difficult. He's owed $30 million in 25, 26. Probably have to attach something to get off that. I mean, the rest of the roster is basically under contract for next year. Like Larry Nance Jr.'s got 1 more year on his deal. Herb Jones is locked in. Trey Murphy's got 1 more, but he's restricted after that. So, nothing too crazy. Their big free agents are Valanciunas. Cody Zeller's a free agent. Willie Hernan-Gomez, Najee Marshall, Tony Snell, a few guys like that. We're deep in the Pelicans roster now, as you can see. But,
yeah, we are. I didn't realize they had Tony Snell this year.
Well,
I saw him with the Maine Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, look, two-way guys. I don't know. I mean, he's been playing for he's had a sneaky long career, so good for Tony Snell. Yeah, either way though, I think they got to blow it up. That McCollum one's going to be tough to get off of, though. There's nowhere. I mean, only 30 mil, but he might be a little tougher to move this year. Trading Ingram would really shake it up. I'd be interested to see what they got back from him, whether it's from a pick's perspective or not. But yeah, you're right about Zion's prime. Like, that's the big thing. I mean, Zion's under contract for 4 more years. You're not really worried about that. But like, there's a real possibility that, I mean, Zion's 24. He's going to be 28 when he's a free agent. But like, you talk about the tread in the tires. Like, Zion's a player. How
much really longer is he going to play after 28? Maybe another 4 years.
I hope a long time, but like, that's a huge if right now. There's no way to say it. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys as always. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. Find the podcast anywhere else you could get your podcast. Watch the pod on YouTube. Shout out to Nick. Get Nick G on Twitter. Play-by-play voice for the Osceola Magic. Anything else you want to plug while you're here? I know you've been on the show like a zillion times, but anything last
I'm
minute?
not. Yeah, I'm not doing a lot of anything else right now. You know what I mean? Like the media career's kind of sitting off to the side.
We're civilians, Nick. It's weird.
I know. I got to be honest. It's kind of nice. So I mean, yeah, I'm all good, man. I'm rarely on Twitter even now, but yeah, you can find me at GetNickG.
I mean, literally, like you have the play-by-play thing going. So you have a foot truly in the game still. This podcast is my foot in the game still. Like I would have no media, anything going on if not for this podcast. And in a way, obviously, like for a number of reasons, like that I am grateful for this because it still helps scratch that itch a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of crazy how much like, we talked about this a little off mic, but like not being in news anymore, like how much you're not up on the day to day is much there. I mean, the only reason I think NBA with this, obviously I'm staying on top of it, but like I think about some of the other sports that have even drifted a little bit as well. So it's wild. Shout out to civilian life. Justin will be back next week. We'll see you next time.